Hello everyone, welcome back to JD Mods, and today we are finally starting on the K24 EP3 Sidewinder install. So I have already done tons of videos on the current turbo setup, but just in case you missed them, I will do a quick 30-second recap. This is a bone stock K24A2 out of a early TSX, so it's not the super desirable one, but it's still an awesome motor nonetheless. And right now it has a eBay log manifold turbo kit with just pretty much all the supporting mods, and I've never tuned it on this setup, so I don't know how much power it makes, but it was kind of fun to drive around. But before getting it tuned, I'm going to be installing a Sidewinder turbo manifold, return fuel system, and a bunch of other awesome supporting mods. So let's start today's video with taking off the old setup. This probably won't be super exciting, so I'm just going to start by removing the downpipe, some of the exhaust, the intake, and start removing the old eBay turbo. So there it is. All of the old eBay turbo stuff, the hot side anyway, is out. I'm going to be using a lot of the same intercooler piping and a few other little things, but let me quickly show you guys what I took out. So most obviously from the engine bay, you can see we are missing a turbo. No more turbo back there. No more intake or anything. I also took off the downpipe and the entire exhaust. Let me show you guys that over here. This is the entire old exhaust. There's the resonator at the back, going up to the cat flex pipe, couple O2 sensors. Here is the old muffler. I might be reusing that one with my eBay kit. We're gonna see. And then just up here, sorry about the distance, we have everything else that I took off. So in this big pile of mess, you can see the turbo I took off, just an eBay turbo. We've got my wastegate tube, my wastegate, intake, some old lines like wastegate line, the old oil feed line, the old oil drain line. There's the hot side intercooler piping. There's my homemade downpipe. You'll recognize a lot of this stuff from the original EP3 eBay turbo install. And I guess lastly over here is the log style manifold. So this is the old manifold it had in it. Obviously not very good flowing manifold, and as I mentioned before, this had some really bad boost creep issues, and for a 2.4 liter motor, that's a pretty small outlet. So let me show you guys what I will be installing instead. You guys saw most of the stuff in this box already from my 500 horsepower Civic unboxing video, but quickly, let me spread out the stuff we're going to be installing in today's video and review it one more time. So up on the tires over there, I've separated all the fuel components, lots of sweet stuff there, but today we will be installing, or at least test fitting, these components here. So I have, of course, the Sidewinder manifold with a 38mm wastegate port going into, not 100% sure actually, probably a T3 based on the size, but could be a T3, T4. I bought it thinking it was a T4, so maybe it's just a really weird looking T4 flange. T4, whatever, turbo flange. And on it is a Garrett GT3582R dual ball bearing turbo going to a 4-bolt downpipe. So there's that downpipe that's on it already. Then there's this downpipe here. I have lots of options for fitment. And then here is the mid pipe that goes from the 3-inch V-band to a 3-bolt flange. And then in this other box we have that massive eBay exhaust kit, which I'm going to do from this flange back. And then also in this box we have a variety of dump tubes and piping. We have a brand new T4 turbo heat shield made by, oh, it's upside down, Highway Sport, H-I-W-O-W, whatever, Hi-Wow. Probably just some knockoff brand, but to be honest, they're all fairly similar in my opinion, and this one seems to be in about average condition. And some heat wrap, and our brand new TurboSmart 38mm UltraGate 38 wastegate. So I'm excited to get all this stuff fitted on the car, so let's do that right now. So there is the Sidewinder bolted on. It was a little bit of customization to make it work because this is an RSX kit, not a EP3 kit. So really quickly I will show you what I had to do to make it fit. So the Sidewinder manifolds and turbo setup requires you to move quite a few items actually. So starting over here on the driver side of the motor, let me show you what I mean. The turbo sits really close. If I grab my light, you can probably see the turbo sits very close to the side of my motor. So I had to remove the electrical harness. There was a protector on the electrical harness. I had to move a bunch of the vacuum lines traveling forward and backwards on the engine bay. The turbo itself doesn't hit anything, but the manifold gets really close to the rear heater lines. I'm not even going to pretend to show you guys the lines. You can kind of see them in the back there, the valve with the blue throttle cable coming off of it. But anyway, quite a surprising amount of stuff that will have to be relocated, but that wasn't my main issue. My main issue is with the downpipe. You can see it right there off the back of the turbo. The downpipe will be going in a very similar location on the RSX, but I think the EP3 chassis is a little different. It gets really tight, and there you can see it kind of well. It got really close to the sway bar right there, but it actually did end up clearing it because I made a custom downpipe using the two that came in the little kit I made. So I'm sorry I didn't show too much of that, but the reason being is because that is pretty standard issue, just bolting it up. That's really simple job if it is made for the chassis that it was intended for. And now quickly, before we get into the more customization, let me quickly walk around to the back of the car and show you the ridiculous exhaust pipe. There it is. The old one's just hanging down below, but there is the new massive can. I'm going to run it for a few seconds, but I worry it's going to be just atrociously loud. So I'm probably going to end up taking it off and replacing with the old dual tip. But there it is right there. Just absolutely massive. Alright, let's keep working away. Alright everybody, so as you can tell, I did a bit more work than I anticipated off camera. And quickly let me explain myself. So I was going to do a more in-depth how-to video. But unfortunately, this is my winter car. And I'm on Christmas, New Year's break right now. But I go to school in about a week. It's like my very first class, and I still have to move down there and everything. And this is the car that has to get me to school, which is around 150 kilometers away. So I need it to be reliable and working good, and have tested it before then. So I need to finish this car up in the next few days. So I really just hammered out the turbo setup, but I do have some time now to explain to you guys lots of the little stuff that I did, because I'll admit it's pretty straightforward if you know what you're doing, but I'll show you guys all the little stuff I did that you can try to do on your build as well. There's a few things that I wasn't 100% sure about, but let's go through now and let's walk around everything I did, keeping in mind that my car was already turbo as an eBay style turbo. Now as the Sidewinder, there's going to be some different parts and some things that crossed over as well. So let me go ahead and explain to you guys what I did. So starting with probably the most obvious thing you see when you look at my engine bay would be the blue intercooler piping, and you can see it right here. So coming off the turbo, I had an intercooler set up for obviously my rear mounted turbo, so the intercooler and two pipes coming up here were already in place. Now this is using a universal kit, so it's not the prettiest intercooler routing job, but it's what I was able to do. So coming off the turbo, I did a 90-degree coupler going to a straight piece of piping, which then goes all the way through the intercooler and comes back up just in front of the transmission tunnel. Let me give you a better view of that with some lighting. So then it comes up from the intercooler piping to my blow-off valve. It's just a clamp-on blow-off valve, nothing special. Just to another few pieces of piping, 90 degree. That is, I believe, a 3-inch to a 4-inch, because I have a 4-inch aftermarket throttle body on this car already, into my intake. So that is the intercooler piping. It was not much work, as I already had the intercooler installed, but the trickiest part was probably using what I had laying around. If I had more time, I could have properly spec'd out some pipes to make it not look so MacGyvered, but I don't really mind it. It's not terrible. Now I guess let's just keep working through the list of what I've done. Next up, let's talk about the turbo oil and water lines. So the oil one's the easiest. It's the exact same as my eBay rear mount manifold. So you go off of the pressure sensor, which if you follow the braided line is right down there. That is a simple T with a 1/8 to 4AN. Then there's a 4AN into the restrictor, as this is a dual ball bearing turbo. So there, of course, is your oil feed going into the turbo. And the oil drain, I did a 10AN off the bottom. Oh yeah, you can just see the large braided line just on top of my shifter cable. 45 degree off the base of the turbo. That goes all the way down to the oil pan. And you're not going to be able to see anything. Don't even know why I tried there. Sorry guys. Anyway, so that's the oil setup. Pretty simple, standard issue as well. But being a ball bearing turbo, a lot of guys have questions about this. There's 2 water lines, and if you didn't know this, the reason why dual ball bearing turbos have water lines, and I'm pretty sure this is the reason, is because they spin so freely. After you turn the key off, it'll keep spinning. And what happens is, because it's warm and with no oil flowing through it, it can actually, with the heat and the friction, bake the oil to the bearings, causing the bearings to seize up or at least get dirty. So the water, I think the idea is to cool the turbo down a lot more. So you sit there turbo timing while the water does its job to cool it off, to prevent baking of the oil. At least that's what I think of anyway. But nonetheless, they're there, so I ran them. So here's one of the water lines coming off of the turbo. You can see it right there, just going into the turbo. It's a black 6AN line, but what I did was just used a little double-ended male barb connector to connect it to one of the hoses going down to my throttle body. All these cars have water lines going to their throttle bodies. You can see them just under there, the 2 of them. And then what I did for the other line, where is it? Here it is, right down here. There's the pipe right there that this originally plugged into. I just plugged the other water line into. So pretty much you just put the turbocharger in line with one of the hoses going to and from the throttle body. And so that'll keep all the water in the turbo, keeping it nice and cool. Next up, let's talk about my wastegate. I know it doesn't sound like anything super special, but it was surprisingly hard to put this on there. This is not the wastegate I will be running permanently. I still need the valve seat for my 38mm TurboSmart one. So until then, I'm running the 38mm eBay wastegate, and basically it's mounted the opposite way I originally anticipated, because look at how close the flange is to my firewall. I had to notch out my plastic drain cowling, whatever that's called, and then in order for the, let me see if I can show you guys, in order for the dump tube, there it is right there, to clear the firewall, I had to do some massaging of the firewall, and I also wrapped it in heat tape to keep it cool. As you can see, it comes pretty close to some vacuum lines and water lines, and the fuel lines over there somewhere too when I do it. So I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to create any fires, so I wrapped the dump tube as well as the actual downpipe. Can't see it, but it is wrapped as well. And for further heat protection, I added this awesome looking blanket on my turbo. I really like the look of it. And this is actually just the vacuum line for your wastegate pressure. That goes to my boost controller and boost source as well. I won't get into any vacuum wiring or anything like that in this video, because there's tons of awesome DIYs online. But if you're curious about location, that hose pretty much goes into my boost controller, which I've done inside the car. And then for boost pressure source, I like to go nice and close to the turbo, as does my tuner. So what I have is just a little nipple, a threaded NPT right there on the charge piping. And then there's the pipe for the blow-off valve. That gets connected to a vacuum source. Some people get this wrong, but it's important for your blow-off valve to go to a vacuum source, which I did the brake booster one on the intake manifold, so that when you snap the throttle closed when you let off the gas, it's getting a lot of vacuum pressure to pop up that blow-off valve and make it sound amazing. Whereas your boost controller, of course, just gets boost pressure, which you can use either a fitting on your turbo if you have one, or on the charge piping just off the turbo. Believe it or not, we are almost done talking about the setup already. The manifold and the downpipe were quite simple. I talked about that a little bit already, so I won't go over that again. So that just leaves some of this vacuum hosing, which will be the last thing I talk about. So on all K-series motors, you have a metal hard pipe in the middle of the motor. Sorry about the harsh lighting, guys, but there's the metal hard pipe. You can see it right there, bolted to the side of the engine block. Also has a bracket for your throttle cable. Now, the problem is it's usually a little bit lower, but with the Sidewinder manifold, as you can see back here, it gets quite a bit in the way. Those two lines are really close to the manifold. So it's going to be really hard for me to show you this stuff, but I'm going to try my best anyway. What I ended up doing was keeping it pretty much factory, except I made it into a V shape, so it's bolted in the middle, and I bent up both hard lines on the end so it could clear the manifold a little bit better. That line's a lot closer than it actually looks. It's still probably about an inch away from the manifold. As you can see, that's an evap line. Then the big fat one is a brake booster line. As you can see, I have a T in there for my vacuum gauge, and it's an aftermarket, as in just a piece of vacuum line going all the way to the brake booster, just in there. The reason for that is because there used to be a stock hard pipe coming out and would hit exactly where the blow-off valve is. So there's a lot more that goes into it than there looks like, just because of all the rerouting. And the other major one was that makes it worse, I think, the main wiring harness. This guy right here used to have a big plastic piece, so I deleted the big plastic piece by cutting it off, and then replace it with just some heat wrap and electrical tape, just to tuck that wiring harness as far away from the turbo as possible. So anyway, that is pretty much the exact setup. I wish my engine bay was a little bit better lit so I could show you guys a lot better, but that is the turbo setup. Now, as you can see in my engine bay already, that there wasn't in the beginning of the video, is this nice matching blue fuel rail. And that is going to be for the next video, where we do the return fuel system. And unlike this video, I'm going to be doing that as a full step-by-step how-to, as these cars come with a return-less fuel system, kind of deadheads at the rail. But my tuner recommends for anything over 8 psi, which is around 330 horsepower, you do a return fuel system, so you can run a regulator. He says it's pretty choppy even if it makes over 300 wheel horsepower, and I would love to see 450, 400 safe. Whatever it ends up making, I'll be really happy. Oh, there's the tripod. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like how it looks. It is just a winter beater, so it's not going to be super clean, but I like it anyway. So, thanks for watching, everyone. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe.